Hi, I'm Christopher Scott, and welcome to the Kid and Friends podcast. Today, we're joined by George Haymaker. He's a former entrepreneur who overcame severe addiction and trauma to become a certified neuroscience coach. At age 50, George was taking 50 pain pills and drinking 2 bottles of vodka a day. After hitting rock bottom, he rebuilt his life through neuroscience, rewiring his brain and body for lasting change. Now he helps others do the same, breaking habits, regulating emotions, and reshaping their lives through neuroplasticity. It's a tough one to say. How are you, George? Nice to meet you.
I'm doing great, Chris. Thanks so much for having me on. It's a real pleasure.
You're welcome. So I did a little bit of research on you. I watched a couple videos, and it sounds like a lot of this stemmed from your childhood, right? And was it and I'd like to touch on that just for a second. And if anything you don't want to talk about, don't hesitate to stop me. But I think I'm a firm believer of the things that happen to us in our lives are what makes us who we are, right? Like you're a coach now and you're teaching people how to rewire their brains. But if you had not gone through all that and done it to yourself, as far as rewiring yourself, you wouldn't be such a great coach because the best coaches are the guys that have been on the field and played the game. So my question to you, as a child, um, it sounded like you had a lot of trauma. Was it a broken household, or was it a family that stayed together and it was just abusive? Like where did all this start that kind of led you down the wrong path?
Yeah. So your comment about where some of our past is absolutely true. The way the brain works is it's recording everything, all the experiences that you're having your entire life, and it's
Yeah.
mapping your brain as a result. And so no two people have the same experiences, and therefore no people have the same maps of their brains.
Right.
So really, the brain is just a filing cabinet made up of all of our past experiences. And so yeah, my story, like many people, starts in childhood, and we start recording these experiences. And if they're unpleasant in any way, then we develop these patterns in response to them to be able to meet our needs.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, I grew up in from the outside, a very privileged upbringing in terms of financially. My dad was successful. He was a corporate climber. But the result of that was we were moving every, 12 months or so into a new city, new town. I
Never
was,
really settling in, no
yeah,
chance to make friends, no time to make connections.
always saying goodbye to people, having to meet new ones, being the new
Yeah.
guy. So it was very unsettled. And so I didn't really know how to form relationships after a while because I just didn't want to have any because I knew I would get hurt on the back end of them. We also had a lot of physical discipline in our home. My parents were from that generation where that was kind of what was done.
Yeah.
And so while I was unsettled and acting up because I was unsettled, I was getting punished because I was acting up. Uh,
Yeah.
also, also experienced some sexual abuse from some older boys when I was young. And then my parents moved overseas when I was in ninth grade, and I went to boarding school here, kind of fending for
Oh, so
myself.
so you basically got left by your family.
Well, yeah,
Kind
I
of.
mean, I guess it's just I had to fend for myself, and so
Yeah.
you just kind of none of that sounds like I guess overly dramatic in any one sense, but when you couple it all together, and plus I had some genetic predispositions to certain things
Right.
that my mom suffered from that also didn't help. So yeah, you pull it, throw it all together in a pot of water, and I was pretty uncomfortable in my own skin.
Yeah. And so up until ninth grade, when you go off on your own, it's abusive. And I'm guessing you're Generation X like I am, where people didn't flinch when a parent laid a hand on you, right? It wasn't such a big deal. I got hit a lot as a kid, and when I look back, I probably deserved most of it, but it also shaped who I am. And there's a fine line between correcting someone for a behavior and then stepping over the line and continuing. And some people have a tough time with that. And I'm assuming your father was probably the one who was hands-on, or was it both parents?
It was both, but my father was he was my idol. And so
Yeah.
when he punished me, it was extra harmful just because it damaged my psyche. Like, here's the guy I wanted to be like, the guy I looked
Yeah.
up to, the guy I wanted to emulate, and he's basically telling me through his actions that you're not acceptable and good enough. And
Right.
so, I carried that with me for a long time. I still, having processed a lot of it, I still want to prove myself today just to make him proud.
Sure. And so when you're going through all these things, and sorry, I'm going to shut this iPad off. When you're a child and you get dropped off at boarding school at 9, you've already had trouble connecting with people because, like you said, you're afraid to get hurt. So you don't put yourself in a situation where you're not going to get hurt. So now you're kind of closeted and you're keeping to yourself. Was it a better experience going from an abusive household to boarding school, or was it just more of the same?
Yeah. So frankly, Chris, I didn't look at any of it as good or bad. I just looked at it as the
Yeah,
way it was. I mean, we
yeah,
all go through our childhoods and think that, well, this is what it is. This is normal. And so
yeah,
I didn't question anything. I just was forward looking, and I developed these patterns, ways of surviving, and that's how I got by in the world. And, turned out that because I was uncomfortable, I was very defensive. I acted out a lot, got angry, quick to anger, hypersensitive, just always seeing everything around me as threats to
yeah,
my significance and security and stability. And so I carried these patterns, which is what happens neurologically. We just keep reinforcing the same things over and over again. And they just get stronger and stronger. So they form these neural
yeah,
pathways in the brain, like roots in the ground. And if we just keep going, we're never going to transfer out of them, never going to know a different way of being. And so that's what it took me, was to hit a bottom with heavy duty addiction, medicating these symptoms, to finally be able to be open to seeing different possibilities and different way forward. I had to. I mean, I was like
yeah. So
bad.
where did the alcohol and drug abuse enter your life? Was it something later, or was it always there?
No, it started in college. So I was a really good boy, afraid to not be a good boy. And then I got to college, and of course, right across the hall, the first night I'm there, guys are listening to Led Zeppelin and drinking Four Roses whiskey. And I
Yeah,
proceeded to get so hammered that I was throwing up all over the place. First time I had ever had anything to drink. And I just thought it was the best thing ever, because
right.
all my problems went away. And so
Yeah,
it
and
was,
you have a sense of freedom and no one to really tell you how to behave, right?
yeah,
Like you see a lot of people, and for example, I have 4 kids. My oldest daughter is from a previous relationship, and her mom was very strict. She went to Catholic school, and we're friends and we're tight, and I talk to my daughter every day. But when she hit college, it was game on, right? And then before you knew it, she was getting herself into a lot of dumb shit because she didn't have the opportunity to kind of ease into it, like dip your toes in the pool of drinking and all that. And she just went hardcore. So does it also, and I'm going to assume it also helps with your social skills.
yeah, it just makes everything better until it doesn't.
Right.
Um, but I would imagine in your daughter's case, and I know in mine, that I was really uncomfortable, carrying a lot of self-doubt, anxiety, and it's just always there, right? It's just
Yeah.
buzzing in the background, and so it's uncomfortable. And so when you find something that relieves it, drugs and alcohol, um, it's like the best thing ever, because
Yeah. You want to do more of it.
it just all goes away, and there's your solution that you didn't realize that it could be better, and here it is. And
Yeah.
so,
And you probably didn't realize why you were doing it either, right? Like the our generation, there was no conversations about mindfulness. There was no conversations about getting in tune with who you are and connecting with yourself. Like it was never a thing, right? Like if you were a kid and you had ADHD, they would call you hyper. Yeah, like there was just so many other terms for things that are either medicated now or they're easily addressable. But like our generation kind of suffered through a lot of that stuff.
yeah. So first of all, you have to have the awareness that something's wrong with you.
Yeah.
And again, I just grew up thinking that this is the way life was. uh, not right or wrong. It just was. And so I didn't know that there was anything wrong or anything to fix or any way to fix. I just didn't know. I just knew that when I drank and used drugs, I felt a whole lot better. And
Yeah.
so that became my solution. The other contributing factor is that in addition to the adverse childhood experiences that many people use alcohol and drugs to cope with those symptoms, I also had a lot of predisposition to addiction. My entire mom's side of my family were all addicts. And so
Okay.
what happens there is that your brain is structured in such a way that you're more susceptible to uh, being an addict once you start. If
Yeah.
you never if you
Gotcha.
never have a drink or a drug, then you're fine. But once you head down that path, it's a lot harder. It's a lot easier to become an addict.
Yeah. And so you hit 50 years old and things are just going south on you. Is there a moment in time where you say, okay, enough is enough? Does something happen that like causes you to pause and rethink your life? Because generally, whenever there's a rock bottom, there's a moment where, there's a reality check. And it's okay, if I keep doing the shit I'm doing, things are going to get worse and I'm going to either be in jail or whatever, or I can take a moment and try to reassess and take control. And I'm assuming you had some sort of a moment where you were like, okay, this has got to change.
Yeah, I liken it to like the mouse that's in the maze, and
Yeah.
I was like turning left and right, trying to figure out how to still conduct my life, and still use the drugs and alcohol and still be successful in business. And I was turning left. And finally, I got to the end of the maze and I was in this little room and there were no more lefts and rights. And the only thing in there was a mirror on the wall, and it was me in the mirror. And
Wow.
I had gotten so bad. I mean, I was, again, you know, for anybody out there that has abused drugs and alcohol like I was, 50 pain pills a day, 2 bottles of vodka, like you cannot go on very long like that.
That's a hard pace to keep up. Like
Yeah.
just think of like how dehydrated you are, like the lack of sleep, and I know how it works with alcoholics and drug addicts is like you biting the dog that bit you the day before and it makes it less painful. But
Yeah,
like
I was get
physically, it's hard to do.
yeah, I mean, I was getting up multiple times a night, throwing up, choking down more vodka and pills to calm the withdrawal so I could get back to sleep for
Wow.
another 2 hours to do it all over again. So what addiction is very progressive. And, it would have been wonderful had I seen the road signs further ahead, further behind,
Sure.
and I would have, said, this has got to stop. I see where this is going. But of course, I had to go all the way to the end of the road.
Yeah.
My wife had left me. Um, I was all alone at home. I took a picture of myself that day. I still have it at the top of my photo album to look at every
Just to
now and
remind you.
again. Well, um, and so yeah, I mean, I physically could not go on, and it was either die,
Yeah.
and I actually kind of acted out a suicidal um, uh, thing at that time, but I didn't wasn't successful getting all the way through it. I
Yeah.
ended up pouring myself into rehab, bounced around between 3 different rehabs until it finally stuck. Um, and that was the moment where I summoned the wherewithal and willingness within to try something different. And
Yeah.
that
And take
started
control. And
well,
was the neuroscience thing something that had suggested to you, or was that a process they were using at one of the rehabs?
no, they weren't using, they don't do much of that in rehab that to my knowledge still.
Yeah,
They basically introduce you to 12-step programs, like AA is a common one.
sure.
That's how I started. But I just was always curious about why I had ended up the way I had. I mean,
Yeah,
AA is fine. It'll tell you do this, do that, and you listen to the elders that came before you and do their suggestions. But there's no
right.
explanation that goes along as to why you ended up the way you did, where you're headed and how you're going to get there, like the detail. And
Yeah,
I'm a curious guy. I just wanted to know why. So I started reading books on spirituality because, 12 step is spirituality based. That led me into
yeah,
psychology, studied a lot of addiction psychology. And what ends up happening is it all takes you back into the brain where all of this happens.
Yeah.
And so, neuroscience, burgeoning field, and it really is where the roots of the problem are. Addiction is a malfunctioning of the reward system of the brain, and it
Yeah.
happens at the neuron level. And so I wanted to get down and dirty where the action is and actually understand it. And then I was so transformed by what's happened to me that
Yeah.
serving and helping others has just become a big part of my life. It makes me feel good about
Sure.
myself. The better I feel about myself, the less inclined I am to fuck it up with a substance.
Yeah.
And so it's just become my new way of life. And so I just wanted to understand it better, deeper, get certified in it, and start to
Yeah.
help others transform their lives.
But that rewiring is really important. I quit drinking about 4.5 years ago. And I was always like fun time guy, drinker. But like COVID hit and I was drinking all the time. One of my kids had an issue where she had gotten in trouble, and I was like, you know what, I'm gonna quit with you. Like acting like I was a hero. In reality, I really, really needed to quit because it was affecting my relationships. And when you look at me, you wouldn't have said, oh, that guy was drinking too much. But like if I'm sitting at home and I'm downing a 6 pack of beer every night and eating chips and washing the chips down, having another beer, sometimes drinking a full bottle of wine, like it was getting out of control. And then I quit to be like acting like I was a hero. I was like, you know what? I'm going to quit for my daughter. I'm going to do this and that. And, that's what I was telling everybody. And one day I was walking with one of my best friend, and it came out in the conversation that, I was lying to myself. I needed to quit because I needed to quit because, I wasn't going on the right path. And like maybe 2 years ago, my family and we were down in Orlando. It was myself, my aunt, my uncles, some of my cousins, my mom, my brother, and his wife, and I were sharing a room, like a hotel. And my brother's like, "Why don't you just have one drink?" And I was like, "You know what? I've been good this long. Let me just have one." And the second I went and bought a bottle of wine at Walmart because they sell it everywhere down there, and I'm starting to crack the bottle open. And the first thought in my brain was, where are we going tomorrow? Which brewery? Where are we going? Like it was literally opening the floodgates. And I felt it right away. Like I knew exactly where this was going. And I just retightened the lid, put it back. And I haven't had a single drink in the 4.5 years, but the wiring in my brain suddenly opened up and said, "Okay, now it's time. You're ready to go. We're back to normal." And I hated the way I felt like that for like the brief moment that it happened. And I
Right.
haven't had a moment like that since, but I realized, like you're talking about, is my brain was predispositioned to want to do certain things.
Yeah,
And
it
if I didn't
wasn't.
fight it, I wouldn't get anywhere.
Yeah, so you had patterned your brain.
Yes.
Not wasn't necessarily predisposed, but over time through habit and through partaking in, that as part of your patterns, you've developed these root systems in your brain, these neural pathways built around getting reward from, drinking. And so
Yeah.
that's what happens in the brain is that alcohol and drugs give us more dopamine than normal life pleasures. And so the brain is wired to pursue reward. That's how it develops its motivation to do things. And
Right.
so when you are giving something that wants reward, 5 to 10 times more reward than it's going to get from normal life pleasures, and doing it over and over again, it gets very accustomed and used to that level of dopamine. And
Yeah.
so then when you stopped, good for you. But then when you reintroduce that, so that pattern of still drinking was still in your brain. It had quieted
Yeah.
down and gone quiet, but it was still there. And once you triggered it, you felt the motivation to not only drink then, but to drink tomorrow, and where are we going now?
Yes.
And I
Yep.
mean, the level of dopamine that I'm sure you also felt it rise within you, like the
Oh,
dopamine,
absolutely.
the
Yeah, I
surge.
had a moment of
Yeah,
excitement. I was like, okay,
yeah,
fun time Chris is back,
yeah,
you know, because
yeah,
it like I'm not as fun as I used to be, and I'm okay with that. But
yeah,
like immediately that rush came to my brain and said, "Yeah, we're back. We're back in business." and
Yeah.
I hated the way it felt because
Yeah.
I realized that I can't have just a drink. I can't just ease my way into it, and I can't just treat it with disregard. I have to understand the power it has over me and to find a way to control it. And it was essentially rewiring my brain like you're talking about. So you do all this studying and you hit a couple different rehabs and you through self-discovery find that neuroscience and rewiring your brain is the way to go. What's your first step once you make that discovery? Like it sounds like you learned it on your own, whether you're on the internet or you're reading or however you learned it. But where do you go after that to start educating yourself further before you can start helping people?
Well, I just did a ton of reading on my own about it, but then I also have taken graduate level coursework in it,
Yeah,
in neuroscience, and then also in coaching, so that I could actually understand the science at a deep level and what's involved in actual transforming people from one state of being into another, in actually getting these neurons to move around and shift,
yeah,
and repattern themselves so that people can actually leave uh, the ways of being that have them stuck, and move into a whole different identity, because that's really what we're doing here is we're crafting and designing a new ideal, more ideal version of oneself that
okay,
that they always wanted to be, that they want to be before they die. And so we
yeah,
actually craft that person. We dig into we test them. We understand what their values are, what their beliefs are, what their strengths are. And we actually design an identity and draw a picture of who this new person's going to be. And it's almost like you're playing a role as an actor.
yeah,
And so you have to envision this person and start to feel how wonderful it's going to be that person, and then you begin to get emotionally attached to that person, and then you start to feel reward around all the good
yeah,
things that are going to come from being that person. So, it's you begin to stimulate the brain's neurotransmitters, the dopamine, to
right,
be motivated by being this new person and how much better that life's going to be than it is, being stuck where you are. And so then what we do is we just start acting out being that person. And so it's
okay,
very much like, let's say you represent an old oak tree in your backyard. You've got these deep roots in the ground and you're not happy with being that tree. So we're going to
yeah,
actually go over to another part of your property and plant a brand new version of yourself. It's going to be a small sapling at first, but we're going to
yeah,
start practicing. We're going to start watering and fertilizing that new little sapling by acting out being that person. And then little by little over time, and generally, when you work with me, it's a 90-day process. You start to
yeah.
become that person. Your neurons in your brain start to move around, to start reflect. They physically reflect being this new person. And before you know it, you've just transformed.
So the
And
pathways have changed. You're changing the pathways and the wiring in the brain.
correct, but you have to start first. You have to be that new
Yeah,
person first before the pathways move around. There's no light switch. There's no
right,
like wand that I can wave. But if you are committed and motivated and fastidious about being a different version of yourself, then what happens is your the neurons in your brain begin to shift and repattern themselves, reflecting this new identity. Um,
yeah.
and so,
Is it difficult for people to identify who they want to be? Like especially somebody who's like like they're locked into their personality and they're there. They're like they're coming to you for a reason. But do they generally have an idea of who they would like to be? Is that a common thing, or is it difficult for a lot of people to envision a new version of themselves?
yeah. So we use building blocks to help them get there. And so
Yeah,
that's where understanding what their psychological needs are. So all of us, all human beings have six psychological needs. We all have the same six. We just have them in different proportions. So we start testing with that to understand what their needs are, because
yeah,
that's where we as human beings run into problem is when our psychological needs aren't met. That's when we start getting misaligned
yeah.
and we don't feel good mentally.
And what
We
are the
under
six things?
Stability, significance, skillfulness, equality, togetherness, and autonomy.
Okay.
Those are the six. And so
Yeah.
we all need them just in different portions. Like I have to be very autonomous.
Hmm.
All that moving around I did, fending for
Yeah.
myself. I have a high need to be autonomous and determine my own destiny. So that's
Right.
just an example. Other people don't have that as much. And so
Yeah.
we use these building blocks. We understand what their values are. Like values are the things they're going to live by as they start living the rest of their life, the credo that they have, their belief systems. We understand what their strength, and we start crafting this version of themselves from the ground up
Yeah.
until until they until it feels right to them. And then we actually write out an identity statement. This is how they're going to be. This is how they're going to think, feel, and act.
Yeah.
And then we set about structuring their life from the morning they wake up to the time they go to sleep, reinforcing the patterns that are going to help them be that person.
Yeah.
It could mean eating differently, sleeping differently, exercising
Sure.
differently, how they just how they understand their mental activity. We have the ability to partner with our brains instead of just taking what the brain gives us, and
Right.
we can listen to what it's telling us and respond instead of react.
Yeah.
There's
It
just
sounds like you're introducing a lot of structure to people's lives as well, because a lot of people I know, like I have a good friend, he was an alcoholic at one point. He hasn't drank in like 15 or 16 years. And we just were in Mexico and we got stem cells when we were down there. I got my neck done. He got his knees and his shoulders. But when we checked into our hotel room, there was a bar in the room. And he's like, we have to get rid of these right now. So I put him in a safe. I changed the code and everything so he couldn't get into it. But literally, like he has to have something through all points of his day to keep him on track mentally and physically. And when he has the downtime, like the brain starts to wander and he wants to go back. So
yeah.
it sounds like you're introducing a lot of structure.
Yeah. So he's developed these patterns where he has to have these things. They meet his psychological needs. And so
Hmm.
he's built his life around these structures that are critical for him to meet his needs and maintain his level of comfort. And so when he starts to deviate from that, um, his identity, like he doesn't understand what that other identity is. Like if he has to
Yeah.
have these things and he's built his identity around it. So as long as he maintains that identity and he's in congruence and alignment, he's comfortable mentally. As soon as
Yeah.
he drifts out of that, he's not, and he knows that about himself. So yeah, I mean, that's why if everything you do during the day is in alignment and in reinforcement of this person that you want to be, nothing is an outlier. Nothing's different than who you want to be. Then all you're doing
Yeah.
all day is reinforcing who you want to be. And so yeah,
Right.
it's really important to have structure and alignment um, you know, um, in order to have this thing stick and be transformative and long lasting.
For sure. And so when someone comes to you, is it always a strict 90-day core like process, or can it vary? It sounds like, because I don't think everybody progresses at the same rate, right?
Correct. I mean, there's so many individual, like how much motivation are you bringing? How much commitment? Like,
Yeah.
who are you as a person versus who is the next? And so there's a lot of variables. 90 days is kind of a nice pinpoint where, you're far enough down the road where hopefully it's taken hold and you can begin
Yeah.
to self-manage. Some people may want to work with me longer. um, Maybe somebody who's a butt kicker might start to feel a whole lot better a lot sooner. The
Yeah.
problem is these patterns that we are leaving behind are still in our brains, and they can be
Yeah.
triggered and brought back into our consciousness at any time. And the question is, will they pull us back into the old way of being, or are we far
Right.
enough along? So we just want to stay at this long enough to where there's less chance of falling back.
Okay. And so when somebody comes to you and you identify those six character traits, is what's the process for that? Like how are you figuring out? Is it questionnaires? Is it conversations? Is it all of the above?
Yeah, I have a questionnaire. It's actually a rapid fire. where you have to answer questions within 20 seconds, so you can't think too much about it.
Yeah. You can't think
Where
of the answer somebody wants you to answer with.
Well, you don't try to outthink yourself, right? I mean, the first answer is the
Right.
one that's the most honest one. And so there's a
Yeah.
series of these questions, and then out spits the report at the end that says you have, here's the priority of how these six different psychological needs stack up in your life. And so then we just start to make sure that how we design this person is going to meet those needs.
Yeah. Okay. And once those needs are identified, I'm sure you mentioned it's small steps that are going to build this person. Like it's like I'm thinking like 3D printer type. Like you're starting at the bottom and it's just kind of rotating up, and before you know it, your person is made. Is it is I'm assuming each category you have to address in a different way. And are you basing it off of like somebody's history? Like, let's say I can't remember all six of them, but one was I think the
Autonomy,
second or
significance,
significance.
skillfulness.
Let's take significance for example. Like somebody identifies they're lacking in that, and they want to build that into their new persona. Like, how is that addressed?
Well, we start talking about the ways in which they might feel significant,
Hmm.
and the ways in which they want to feel significant. So, just as an example, um, I started off, and many people do in their careers, wanting to conquer the world, make a crap load of money, um, accumulate, reach status. That's their
Yeah.
version. That's their version of significance.
Yeah.
And so we figure out, you know, but are those tied to their values? Are those the things that they want to live by?
Right.
And so the other thing is, these needs will evolve, and some will lessen, some will increase over time in their lives. So like right now in my life, I could care less about conquering the world. I just want
Yeah.
to be good at what I do, skillful, and help people.
Yeah.
And that's my version of significant. And so we just have to really understand, a lot of times it's trying these things on for size as to, you know, um, what is going to actually make this person feel that way and satisfy that need while still sticking to their values.
Yeah.
Because a lot of times we violate our values I mean, we think we want things, but is it really going to um, give us significance in a way that's going to align with our values?
Right. It's in a productive way.
Correct.
Right. Like
Yeah.
you mentioned success, and I always mention this, like to me people are like Dungeons and Dragons characters where you roll and you get your points, and you can only put points into so many things. And I find that people like super successful people, the people that are all about money, they're about the world viewing them as significant versus them like truly being significant to themselves. But I find that people that are like that tend to be lacking in other areas. And so, they're to me, it sounds like we're redistributing points that somebody might have, right? Like you're realigning the things that you should have and that maybe you missed along the way.
Yeah. But you may also, if you got one of those individuals, um, to tell you the truth, deep down, is what is that path that they're pursuing, accumulating more and more money, is that really satisfying that need for significance?
Yeah.
Because what you can find is, you know, they've accumulated a lot, but the need is still isn't being satisfied. Like there's something missing.
Right.
And so that's really where they built this identity around making a bunch of money, but it's not satisfying the need of significance.
Yeah.
They have a deeper need, or they have one that's aligned with who they really are, what their values really are. And so that's where they suffer misalignment and mental
Hmm.
discomfort, is because they've accumulated all this. They don't know why their needs aren't being met. They're not happy. And so that's where I would help them understand, well, this this path, this identity that you've built is not satisfying this need for significance.
Yeah.
How else might we meet that? And so that's, what this transformation is all about is
Sure.
taking people that are in these places that aren't comfortable. Discomfort is really the signal for my needs aren't being met.
Yeah.
That's really what it is, and they're misaligned in some way. And so we just try to pull the studs down, get back down to the foundation, relay the foundation, really understanding who they are as people at a core level, and then
Yeah.
building the studs of their life back, reconstructing their life, so they can play this role for a while until it just everything starts to fall in alignment. They
Yeah.
don't feel any misalignment in any way. They're happy. They feel whole. They're energized. They
Right.
feel finally like this is who I'm meant to be. Uh, and
Yeah.
that's why, making a lot of money isn't always the end all be all.
No, it's not. And you've mentioned values multiple times. Do you find that when you have a new client, are most people unaware of what their values are?
Yeah, because they haven't thought about them. I mean, they have them deep down inside. They're there, but they haven't
Yeah.
identified and connected to them. And so they possibly aren't living by them. And that's where the misalignment occurs. So these are like deep roots within you. And if you're not acting in accordance with them, like if you have this value of being honest
Yeah.
and you rob banks, you are acting in violation of a deep value that you have.
Right.
And so you are not going to be a happy individual. I mean, you may, you know, you're going to have mental discomfort. You're going to be out of alignment. And so
Yeah.
it's all about lining up, your identity and how you're acting, thinking, and feeling every day in alignment with what's at your roots.
Yeah. And it sounds like there's a lot of looking in the mirror like you did in your maze and being honest with yourself. Because a lot of people will lie to themselves and tell themselves that things are okay. But when you really get down to it and you pull out the mirror and you look at yourself and nobody knows you're lying except for you sometimes. And that's a hard reality when you're lying to yourself.
It's not comfortable, right? I mean,
Yeah.
who really wants to lie to themselves? So that's what it's going to take for people. It like took me 50 pain pills and 2 bottles of vodka a day to get honest with myself. What is it? A lot of people don't have those types of consequences in their life. So
Yeah.
what is that point where they decide, I want to be happier. I want things to be different. But here's the other thing is that the brain is resistant to change. So when change feels hard, the reason for that neurologically is because the brain, its number one job is to keep you safe, surviving, to scan the environment, take in information, look for threats, and just keep you alive so that you can meet a mate, have a baby, and evolve the species. Okay, that's really the
Yeah.
brain's job. And so when you start introducing new and different visions of yourself, the
Hmm.
brain has no idea what being that person is going to be like. It doesn't know if it's safe. It doesn't know if you can survive it. Um,
Yeah.
and so it's resistant. The brain likes what's familiar, it likes what's predictable, so that even if you're not happy and you've had negative experience in your life, your brain knows that you're alive and that,
Yeah.
even if you're unpleasant, you're alive and it's kept you
Right.
safe. So it knows if we keep doing the same things over and over again, it's doing its job. And so when you start suggesting radical change, it gets uncomfortable and resists it because it hasn't
Yeah.
experienced it yet. And so that's what we help people do is not grind through, work through the initial
Yeah.
stages of that transformation so that we stay on course until the brain has a chance to experience it. And little
Yeah.
by little, it understands that it's safe and it's okay. And then it understands that it's actually rewarding, that it's actually
Yeah.
better than where you've been. So then it starts to get on board and says, wow, it starts to feel that motivation like you felt when you cracked open that liquor bottle. It starts to feel
Yeah.
motivation to being this new and better person because I start to feel better. I'm better when I'm this new person. So the brain starts to like it. And that's when you start to go over the top and it begins to take hold, and there's no
Yeah.
looking back, and you start to develop all these new patterns into like like you stop drinking, and now you would never go back because life is so much better now. But
Yeah.
your brain didn't know that before, but you introduced it
No.
to it. You introduced it, you develop new patterns. The brain realizes this way's better, and there's no going back now.
Yeah. And people will ask me on a regular basis, like, hey, and it's interesting to me how many people will come up to me and say, hey, man, I appreciate and I find that awesome that you quit drinking. I would love to do that, but I can't. Like I hear that all the time and it amazes me. And I actually never thought about it like in context of this conversation where I've rewired myself. And for me, like for I had an idea who I was and who I wanted to be, and there was it was kind of a blurred line for a little while where I couldn't really tell which one was which, and it took a minute, right? It took a little while, and once it set in, and like that moment where I cracked the bottle open was the minute it solidified itself in me, and I'm not even realizing that until I'm having this conversation with you right now. Like the second I was able to turn that bottle off and for me, one of those things is it's one of the things I've been completely honest with myself about, and I don't want to fail at that one thing I've been completely honest about. Now I've been able to take it into other parts of my life as well. But when you're building that persona with a brand new person, and you're planting the tree in the other side of the yard, and this person is starting to migrate towards being that person is there a lot of times where like the mental resistance is there where they don't want to allow themselves to become that person like subliminally where like the intent is there but something inside their head is holding them back.
Yeah, that thing inside their head is their brain's resistance to change, because
Yeah.
it still hasn't experienced enough of being that small new little tree yet. That tree hasn't been watered and fertilized enough, meaning it hasn't gone through the repetitions enough, hasn't
Yeah.
experienced it enough for it to then begin to feel safer. So that resistance is its feeling of not being safe.
Okay.
And so that's what happens at the beginning. Like when you first started taking jujitsu and when you teach new students, it's hard for people, right?
Yeah.
Okay. And so, and you know the path, you know that it's going to take X amount of time for them to the light bulbs start to go on and for them to
Yeah.
begin to, for things to begin to transfer from have them having to grind and think about every little move and process. And now it begins to become more automatic. That's exactly learning how to do jujitsu is the same thing as learning how to become a new and different person, having a new and different mental life.
Yeah, I'm rewiring my brain.
It's a skill like anything else, whether it's learning a new instrument, learning a
Yeah.
new language. It's hard at the beginning. We have to work super hard at it. It's
Yeah.
takes a lot of mental energy up here in the front part of our brain. We have to fight through things. But what we have this vision that when we get there, it's going to be better. And little by little, if we just celebrate the small little victories,
You
the
build
small
upon it.
you build upon it, you start getting reward, not from visioning the end of the road. You start enjoying the process. That's really
Yeah.
where all this is. And it's not, like, I'm sure you love just the daily process of practicing as much as you do like
I
the
do.
reaching the
I love every
pinnacle.
moment of it. And it's funny because like this morning I was teaching class and I taught multiple classes today, but I taught one at 6 o'clock this morning. And I'm a second degree black belt, which means I've been training for a long time. And everything I do looks smooth when I do it. And I'm showing a technique and there's two blue belts off to the side. It was Josh and I can't remember who the other person was, Paul. And they're just it's almost like they didn't even pay attention to the technique I was teaching. And if they're blue belts, which means it's like the first belt in the adults. And I look at them both and they're like, and one of them goes, well, you're just really good at it. I said, yeah, and I'm going to use the R word. It's offend some people. And I'm like, yeah, but I was retarded like you at one point. And they're both looking at me. I said, yeah, I said, I'm the same as you. I just have been doing it longer and I rewired my brain. And they're both like,
You
oh, okay. And
Yeah.
a light bulb goes off in their head and they're like, oh, okay. So there is hope. that
Yeah.
I can get to a level. But we all
Yeah.
have to start somewhere.
Yeah. And
And
what you could tell them next time is their neural pathways haven't developed yet.
yeah, and it's like learning a new language, and rewiring your brain is re like learning a new language, but you're rewiring your brain. So when somebody starts creating those neural pathways, how what do you do to help keep them on track? Because I'm sure when people leave after the 90 days, I'm sure there's probably contact you have, and maybe they're touching base with you down later down the road. But with your process, do you find that people are less likely to have a relapse because it's a long, slow, tedious process where they're building upon like the person they want to be and building in these character traits that they didn't have before, and they have this ideal vision of themselves? Do you find that people tend to, once they rewire their brain, do they tend to stick with it and not have moments where they fall back?
Yeah. Well, let me ask you a question. When you're teaching a new technique, how many iterations, repetitions do you think it takes for them for it to get smooth?
I mean, if we're being honest, the armbar I learned at blue belt was kind of crappy, but I got away with it. And then it got a little better at purple, got a little better at brown, got a little better at black, and it still gets better all the time. But it's probably maybe 100,000 repetitions at this point.
Okay. So, we're talking a lot of repetitions. And the key is for the brain to begin to understand that this new way and begin to experience, not just understand, but experience that this new way is more rewarding than the old way. And
Yeah,
so the brain will pursue where it can find uh, reward. And so what we want to do while we're practicing being this new person is identify and stay in touch with and feel emotion around, because emotion is like the gasoline or the glue. It's the stickiness.
yeah,
It's the thing that really holds these new patterns in place. Um, so if the brain is experiencing the benefits and the goodness that's coming from being this new person, even in small little ways, that's what creates the motivation, the dopamine to want to keep
yeah,
going, keep reiterating and reiterating and reiterating. Um, and then, again, the amount of repetitions depends on the person. So much is individualized, but at some point, um, and it's not to say that this process never has one step back, two forward,
right.
because you will. But then when you have the step back, you immediately, the awareness is there that says, well, that's not who I am. That's not
Yeah,
who I'm striving to be, and that doesn't feel good anymore. So it's like when you crack that bottle, it's like, well, that's not who I am. I had experienced, when you quit drinking, you had experienced enough of the new life. It was rewarding enough that at
yeah,
that moment of truth, you put the cap back on because your brain said, I do not want to go back there. I've experienced enough good things from this new way of being that I'm going to stay on course. So that you
yeah,
just gave a perfect metaphor for what can happen, as we're developing this becoming this new identity.
yeah. And so when you were in your own process, what were you envisioning in yourself that was missing, and what were the first few things that you really started working on as a person?
Oh boy. So when you're an addict, you've got two things to work on. You've got the addiction itself,
Hmm.
and then you've got all the underlying things beneath it that were causing you to want to drink and use in the first place.
Yeah, so there's
So,
a lot going on.
well, so the first step is to get rid of the drugs and the alcohol because you can't work on anything if you're down that path. And
Yeah.
so you just need to stay away from drugs and alcohol long enough and begin to reset and rewire the reward system of your brain so that you start to experience reward from normal life pleasures again. Because when you're an addict, like nothing matters. The only thing
Mm,
that matters is the drugs and the alcohol. Like having a good meal is not enjoyable. Having sex when you're not on drugs and alcohol isn't enjoyable. Like all the
yeah.
things that we, you know, working out, not enjoyable. So
Right.
you need to just need to have distance from the substances while introducing pleasurable experiences again, and you're through the forgiveness of the brain and neuroplasticity, you can start to reset and recalibrate the reward system of your brain to start to come down and experience dopamine pleasure off of normal life pleasures again, but it takes time.
Yeah.
Once that's well underway, then you can begin to then uncover why you're mentally uncomfortable in the first place. And in my case, that was going back to childhood and digging into, the things that the reason I was feeling uncomfortable in adulthood traced back to,
Yeah.
and I had to unpack and uncover those, realize just the epiphany and insights that you get around understanding why you're uncomfortable as adult,
Yeah.
tracing them back to childhood. Just that understanding by itself is sky opening. Like the possibilities
Oh,
start to,
yeah. It,
just
it
to have an explanation for it, right?
it's amazing. Like I've always had this thing where I don't like to be controlled, and I like to be in control myself, and I'll tend to run away from stuff that feels like it's kind of closing in on me. And it didn't dawn on me till maybe 2, 3 months ago. Like I had an incident when I was a kid, and it was like Christmas time, and my cousin had broken like a new fire engine that he had, and my uncle thought I was the one who broke it, and he pretty much beat on me for about a half hour, wouldn't let me out of the basement, kept dragging me down by my ankle. Eventually, my dad heard, and he went down there and had a different conversation with him. But I never realized that was a reason for why I felt that way. And then one day I was having a conversation with someone like yourself on my podcast, and it dawned on me, like, this is why I behave this way. Like I had never identified it before. And I think when you have that ability to identify your reasons for things, like you're talking about like the childhood trauma and the sexual abuse, but it probably never made sense, and probably didn't, maybe you didn't associate it with your brain as to why you had certain behaviors. Right. And then once you're able to do that, you can start rewiring your brain. And like I completely understand how you rewire the drinking part, just be it based on my experience. But how do you start to rewire your reactions to things like the things that happened to you as a child? Like how do you get control of those?
Yeah. So the key is to go back to the origins of where things might have started, and loosen the grip of those on your psyche.
Yeah.
So again, taking the experience that you discussed, um, obviously that was a highly emotionally charged event. You were threatened. And again, remember the brain's number one job is to keep you safe and in survival. So anything that
Yeah.
threatens your survival is a number one in terms of what your brain is going to remember and hold on to. And so that was a highly charged, deeply rooted event in your life. And so what we would do is go back to that, understand why you're still feeling remnants of it and associations to it into adulthood. And just by virtue of you understanding that begins to loosen the grip that it has
Yeah.
on you. And then we say, well, is this serving you? Is this serving you in adulthood anymore? And you're going to probably say, no, I don't want to feel this way. Um,
Yeah.
and there's a number of different exercises we can go to loosen the grip of that on your psyche so that you're not bound by it so much.
Right.
The emotion of it begins to loosen because you can see it objectively. Okay. And so then what happens in your brain is you are open to new possibilities. By loosening the grip of that, it no longer has hold on you. And then you can begin to think about, okay, in adulthood, when these situations arise, that experience comes to me. How would I like to experience these new situations? Since the old
Yeah.
way doesn't have a grip on me anymore, and I'm open to more possibilities, let's start to construct how I would prefer to have these situations go down. And then we can start to construct the actual ongoings of how you would think, feel, and act in these
Yeah.
new situations. And they have to be in alignment with this new identity that you've constructed of yourself, your values. So we actually go through take it on a drawing board and go through how you're going to feel, think, and act in these situations that arise in adulthood that used to trigger you, and we're just going to create new scenarios. And
Yeah.
then
Like you're strategizing basically.
yeah, and then you act them out. And you may, and that old pattern may come back, especially if you're stressed out. And then you stop yourself and you say, no, I'm not going to engage in that old pattern again that is referencing this time of my childhood when, this guy was giving it to me in the basement.
Yeah.
This is how I'm gonna be. And the more times you rep it, like the more times you rep a jujitsu technique, the better
Yep.
you get at it. And your brain starts to say, you know something? This new way is less threatening. It's more rewarding. I feel better about myself when I'm engaging this way. And
Yeah.
and if you do it enough times and coax and train your brain, the neural pattern begins to shift, and
Yeah.
then you that starts to become your default, and you just leave the old thing behind. And so now I can still remember the old
Yeah.
things that happened in my childhood, but I don't have any. That doesn't have a grip on me. It's like
They
a
don't
chap.
affect you the same way.
It's like a book that we've packaged up and we've put it on the shelf and say, that was part of my life, but it's now in my past. It's a volume of my life, but it's not my life now.
Yeah. And I until I had that moment, I didn't realize the significance it had in my life. And like I was out with my mom a few weeks ago, and I was talking to her about I mentioned it, and she's like, I don't remember that. I'm like, how do you not remember that? It was such a big event, but for me, it was a big event, and maybe for her, she was maybe not paying attention as much. My dad for certainly remembers, but I didn't realize that it had done that. And when I had that realization of how important that moment was, I was able to let go of it. And I was able to realize, and this might have been a year ago. And now when I feel that feeling that is associated with being controlled, like I'm better able to analyze it and react to it versus having it force me to do something against my will in my head. And I don't know if that's the right term for it, but like I subconsciously would lose control versus now I have control over it.
Now you're a partner with your mind. These mental these mental experiences come forward into your mind. You're able to look at them objectively, analyze them, pause, reflect, and then respond, as opposed to react. And that's the difference between a pattern having a grip and hold on you, where you're just
Hmm.
reacting because you're under threat. It takes you right back to that moment when you're under threat. Now you've analyzed it, come to terms with it, um, you've loosened the grip that it has on you. The
Yeah.
emotional component's not there anymore. And now you've considered new possibilities as to the way you'd prefer to be in those circumstances. You've started to practice those. You've rewired your brain so that
Yeah.
that's your new default. But it's not to say that it's never going to come forward as an option in your mind, because it was so predominant, such a
Yeah.
life forming event, had so much emotion attached to it, that it's a pattern that, you know, will probably always be with you. It just won't have the same hold and grip and, you know,
Yeah.
that it used to.
And I didn't realize it had any control over me. That was probably the first problem. And I think with a lot of people that have impulse behaviors and can't behave a certain way are unaware of the reasons. Like you were mentioning earlier in the conversation that, it was more of a self-discovery at some point as to why you behaved a certain way. And with the process, is there a lot of moments that people have where they're having self-discovery and they're realizing that this moment in time or this thing that happened or thing that happened multiple times has way more control of them and how they react to things that they weren't even aware of.
What you're describing is an insider epiphany, and the look that people have on their faces when they realize it is
Yeah.
just like, it's one of the best parts of my job, because they they have a moment where they're seeing something with a brand new fresh set of eyes that they weren't able to see before, because that pattern was just so tightly packed and woven that they couldn't even see it. And that's
Yeah.
really what I help them do, is people come to me with mental discomfort or being stuck, and I help them unpack why, take them back to that place, loosen the
Yeah.
grip, develop this new identity that they would like to have, and then help them transform into it by building their life that evolves around this new person that
Yeah.
where these old patterns don't have the grip and control over them that they used to.
And what's the process for discovering some of those moments in time where people became a certain way? Is it through meditation? Is it a one-on-one conversation? Like how do you basically it's almost like you're a miner and you're walking, you're not even a miner, but you have like one of those radar metal detectors and you're walking on the beach, right? And
Looking
there's
for
just
coins.
sand. Exactly. Like, how are you finding the coins? Like, is there a process where you're taking people to certain points and then they have that moment of self-discovery? Is is that determined through the initial questioning and conversations and the persona building where you figure out, okay, maybe something happened here, and then you all of a sudden you're with your metal detector looking for metal on the beach.
Yeah, that's such a great metaphor. I'm going to steal that.
Yeah,
But
feel free.
that's where the skill of coaching is involved, is creating an environment where the individual feels comfortable and relaxed. Their brain switches off from highly activated task-oriented modes where they're grinding and thinking like they do in their daily lives to um, default network mode, which is more the rested and relaxed mode, where they can
Hmm.
daydream and think about, big picture, and they're not attached to any particular task. And so those are two different modes that the brain can get in. The nervous system needs to be calmed where they're just rested and relaxed and calm. And then their mind begins to open up to just thinking about things.
Yeah,
And so that's where I need to get them. I need to get them in the right state. And I need to ask the right questions at the right time in the right sequence to get these things to come out. And
yeah,
if I'm skillful at what I do, then we get, right to where the source of these things lie. And the person will find it themselves. Because again,
yeah,
if I'm asking the right questions, they'll be like, they almost won't even have to answer the last question. They'll just be like, oh, and they finally it dawns on them. And then
yeah.
we begin to unpack that, and and then it just that's where the doors begin to open.
Yeah, and one of the things I love about podcasting is I get to speak to a lot of people like yourself, but almost every episode that I've ever done, I've had some moment like that where I've had some sort of discovery in my brain. And it doesn't matter what the topic is, right? I had a woman on, we were talking about forgiveness. I had a moment there. I had a woman that we were talking about your different love types, like how you love other people. I had a moment there, but almost every conversation and the significance of that moment that we were talking about with me didn't make as much sense until I'm having this conversation with you. So for me, like I love this because I get to have that epiphany almost every episode. And for me, it's so selfish. But for me, I get to love it as well. And if somebody else learns something about themselves through these conversations, that for me is like one of the greatest things. And so when you discover that moment, and you figure out why someone has a certain not predisposition, but certain wiring in their head as to why they act a certain way. How do you start to get them off of that and to develop the other thing? Like I know about the building the persona, but to how do you get them to integrate that persona into who they actually want to be and who they are on the inside? Is it through those baby steps? Like, is there exercises they go through, conversations? Like, what's the process?
Yeah. So it's again constructing this new identity,
Yeah,
this vision that they have for themselves. And bear in mind, this isn't like um, necessarily um, broad, dramatic changes necessarily. I mean, there's
sure.
lots of good things in everyone's life that they're going to bring forward with them and incorporate and integrate into this
Yeah.
new identity. There may be,
Like they're not
you
getting rid of the old person. They're just taking it down to the studs like you talked about. Like the
Yeah,
foundation, like you're rebuilding it.
yeah, and so let's say that there were termites in your wall, and just one corner of your house was damaged by termites. Well, you're going to bring all the good wood back over to reutilize and repurpose in the new house.
Yeah,
You're just going to replace all the termite infested wood. So that's
yeah,
really what we're doing. What parts of your life are currently unhelpful? Let's make sure that we deal with those, but also let's get down to the foundation and make sure that we've identified what your needs are, how we're going to satisfy them, what your values are, build some belief systems around how you look at yourself that reinforce this new identity. Let's construct everything, make sure the foundation's right, and then we
yeah,
begin to build the structure of your life or the structure of the house that reinforces being that person. And so then again, we're bringing over a lot of the good parts of your life, so you're just going to continue to do those things while integrating some new things
yeah.
to help um, put you over the top and get everything in complete alignment.
Do people have a tough time identifying the good things in their life? Because there are people out there that are in bad situations and may look at everything around them as bad and just not see the trees for the forest, even though they're standing right in the middle of it.
Yeah, because they're overwhelmed by the patterns that are really the negative patterns that are really unhelpful to them.
Yeah,
Again, they can be so dominating in someone's life, having such dramatic effects, being so emotionally charged that they're just overwhelming the good parts. So that's part of what we'll do is identify what is working in your life, what isn't working in your life, and really try to build upon the good. Because again, we need this is all about fun and motivation and
yeah,
experiencing better, right? This isn't we're trying to the brain is naturally going to resist change at the beginning. So I need to help this individual make this process and experience fun. Like
yeah.
this is going to be so
There's a
freaking
bit of a
great.
dopamine rush part of it.
Yeah, I mean, this needs to be inspiring. And right out of the gate, we need to begin celebrating our small little wins and just being engaged in this process of being a better version of ourselves. It needs to be exciting. And so that's what, it's all about positive. It's all about reinforcement. It's all about the good. And then
Yeah,
if we have setbacks, those are okay. It's only natural. They're not. Let's not lose track of what we're accomplishing here because we had a
right.
setback. And so, if I can teach people how the brain works and why they're having a setback, then they can look at it more objectively instead of being overwhelmed by it. If they
Yeah,
expect setbacks to happen, then they're not surprised when they come, and they know why they came, and they know what
the
to do,
reaction's different.
and they respond instead of react. So we want to get away from reacting into
Yeah,
responding, thoughtful, um, objective response. Okay,
yeah,
we want to listen to what the brain's telling us. It's just information. Nothing that happens in our mind is true until we make it
yeah,
so. And so it's really just people having a better understanding of how their brains work and that they can actually partner with it and the brain's willing to change with them just gives them a whole new perspective on
yeah.
how to start living their life day to day.
And are you familiar with Stoicism? Like the teachings
Mhm.
of Marcus Aurelius? Like one of the sayings in there, and I'm gonna butcher it, is expect to meet a certain number of assholes every day when you go out in the world, right? And like I drive all the time, and people are like, "Don't you hate traffic?" I'm like, it doesn't bother me because I know I'm gonna get stuck in it. It's so like I understand that I'm gonna get stuck in it, so my reaction to it and how I respond to it is different than somebody who doesn't prepare themselves mentally, saying, "Okay, I'm gonna meet a certain number of assholes today, or I'm gonna sit in traffic for a certain amount of time." Like if you mentally prepare those things in your head, the reaction is different. So it's kind of the same way with like you're training your brain to respond in a different way than it had in prior times to the same stimulus.
You're the best because you get this stuff. So um, all of us, all experience is constructed in the moment. We have the ability to construct experience any way that we see fit. So when we talk about the word stress, most people interpret that as being negative, right? They have a
Yeah,
negative connotation to it. All stress really is the is the brain summoning resources from the body for what it deems as a metabolically significant event. So uh, there's nothing in that description says negative. It just means
Right.
I need to summon resources within my body to deal with something that my brain is telling me is going to require resources.
Yeah.
We have constructed stress to be negative. So let's say that you are going to get up in front of an audience and speak. Um,
Mm-hmm.
that doesn't, so your brain is going to tell you that, oops, I'm going to need resources to be able to do this. So it's going to summon maybe some cortisol, some
Yeah.
some norepinephrine, which is a neurotransmitter for highly for attention and focus. It's going to summon adrenaline. Okay, none of
Yeah.
that has to be bad. So you could work with your brain on constructing that experience as being a challenge, something to overcome, something to
Yeah.
conquer, something to be good at versus, oh my God, taking it into this bad place. Um,
Yep.
and those are all patterns that we develop. Our relationship with stress is a pattern that we practice and develop. If we continue to see it as negative, it's we're gonna um, we're gonna pattern it as negative.
Yep.
If you go out into traffic and you continuously view it as negative, you're going to experience it as negative because your brain is going to summon that experience back in front of you. If
Yeah.
you, but you have reconstructed it into something different. So I'm sure maybe you look at being in traffic as an opportunity to listen to your podcast or listen to someone
That's
else's
exactly
part.
what I do.
Okay, so then now it becomes a pleasurable experience because
Yeah.
you've reconstructed it.
Well, I'll put this in jujitsu perspective. Like one of the most popular sayings in Brazilian jiu-jitsu is get comfortable in uncomfortable situations, right? And let's say like a guillotine. You got somebody's head in your arm, you got your legs wrapped around them, you're choking the shit out of them, right? When I was a blue belt and a white belt, I would tap to that instantly. Now, if my head gets caught in anywhere, I'm perfectly fine. I'm calm. I'm going to think my way out, and I'm most likely going to get out of whatever that is. But it's because I've rewired my reaction to it differently, right? Like as a blue belt, like it's surprising, it's scary, it's all these things. Like I don't have a counter to it. I don't have a way to escape it. I don't have the experience to get me out of the situation. And the further you go along in the process, you know, I've developed a skill where I have 10 or 12 different ways to get out of this same thing. The surprise of it is no longer something. It's more of disappointing in myself for letting my head get stuck somewhere and I find my way out. But it's because I've rewired the way I react to it. Same as the traffic where, I'm expecting to be in this bad situation and now I know how to react to it. So I fully understand this whole process and I love it. And, it's for me, the brain is such an amazing thing. Like spirituality was never a thing for me up until the last few years. Self alignment, self being in tune with myself, being mindful and being in the moment. Like none of that shit meant anything to me because I was just going through life. The moment I quit drinking was the moment my brain was not clouded anymore and I was able to think through all these things. So for me, that was very life changing. And I love the fact that you've come to a place in your life where you've figured out how all these things work for you and you have the ability now share them with somebody else and put them on the same path.
Yeah.
And that's pretty awesome. So where can people connect with you socially for actual assistance as well? Like, do you have a book or anything you've written? Like, what's the best way to contact you and find different ways to work with you?
Yeah, so find me on LinkedIn. My name is George Haymaker, Haymaker, just like the punch. Um, and then also I have a website, georgehaymaker.com. You can sign up for free newsletter there. I have free brain hacks that you can sign up for. That's on the insights page of my website. And then there's also a link for a free discovery call where we can spend 30 minutes on the phone for free in a no pressure environment no pitching, just listening to what's going on with you in your life. And let's
Yeah,
see if, brain science and brain education and coaching can help you in your life. I just love meeting people, so please take advantage of that.
that's awesome. And it seems like you've made a 180 on the person that you are. And I congratulate you on that. And one of the things that I'm going to be doing in a few months down the road is I'm going to start pulling together people I've had conversations with. Like I had a really great conversation with you today, but I have, somebody over here who we're all swimming in the same direction in the river, but different approaches to things and maybe start focusing on some topics and how to handle them and getting different perspectives in the same conversation. So I would love to invite you to some of that stuff when I start doing it. And if you want, just hang on one sec. I'm going to wrap this up and then I'm just going to chat with you for one more minute here. Hang on one sec.
Sure, you bet.
Yeah, I'm really glad.